I am really glad that I have the opportunity to spend 6 months with you guys. There are so many important things to address when it comes to any kind of permanent change. And this week, once again, I'm sharing a big one. Write this down somewhere, even if you've written it down before. Everything we do out of our need to avoid pain or seek pleasure. Everything. I don't care if you're working to break a bad habit, if you're addicted to your smartphone and social media, if you're codependent, if you have an eating disorder, if you smoke, or if you have another secret addiction. This week, I'm talking to you. We talk at The Healthy Way about the reward system for any kind of change. And that reward system starts in our brain. Our brains are primed for rewards. Our brains are created for pleasure. Our first clue into the existence of the way our brains seek rewards happened by accident back in the 1950s. Researchers James Old and Peter Milner discovered it. They put electrodes into the limbic systems of rats' brains and sent a teeny tiny shock of that area to the brain where the rat entered a particular corner of the box. In theory, the shock would be so unpleasant that it would make the rat want to stay away from the corner. This is because with enough shocks, the rat's brain would rewire itself to think of the corner as a bad place. But the electrodes were placed in the area of the brain where the dopamine pathway is, by mistake, so that the rats did exactly the opposite of what was expected. Rather than avoiding the corner, the rats kept going back to the corner and getting shocked over and over and over again to get the hit of dopamine. Some rats went back up to 700 times within an hour. One went 7,500 times within a 12-hour period. Overachiever. The rats couldn't describe craving to us, but certainly the repetitive nature of their dopamine seeking made it clear that this was something they needed to do. The increase in motivation and energy that dopamine provides can be a good thing. But when your brain gets wired to a compulsive behavior that stimulates the dopamine reward pathway, addictions, then your life can be as out of control as the poor rats in the box. The studies looked shockingly similar to the list of overeating and obesity, drug and alcohol abuse, consumerism, unhealthy relationships. Not only do these addictive, destructive behaviors get paired to the dopamine reward system, but they create a feedback loop of isolation that pushes people towards more addictions. Without healthy habits set in place, we each become like the rats in the box, seeking dopamine from all the wrong places. To make permanent changes, we must rewire our brains for healthy relationships and healthy lifestyle choices that reward us with positive energy, motivation, and a healthy life. Dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter. Your body makes it between the nerve cells. That's why sometimes it's called the chemical messenger. Dopamine plays a big part in how we feel pleasure. It's a big part of our unique human ability to think and plan. It helps us strive, focus, find interesting things. Your body spreads it along the 4 major pathways in the brain. When the brain's exposed to something rewarding, it responds to the reward stimulus by increasing the release of dopamine. Dopamine is the main player when it comes to our brain reward system. It's a neurotransmitter that feeds our brain's reward system and increases our motivation, pleasure, and addiction. High levels of dopamine involve a loss of reality, delusions, lack of emotion. Low levels of dopamine are associated with risk-taking and addictive behavior. It's been proven that within the pancreas, dopamine also synthesizes and secretes hormones like insulin into the bloodstream. When dopamine's released, the stress-reducing hormones like cortisol are released from parts of our brain. Serotonin, the happiness hormone, is released as part of the reward. Addictive drugs and behaviors such as smoking, drinking, gambling are rewarding to us, our brains, and are therefore reinforced because of their effect on the dopamine pathway, also known as our brain reward system. When we're motivated to do something, it begins because our brain wants to do it, because it'll get a dopamine reward. To take it step by step, our brain reward system first finds a target. This target causes the brain to release dopamine with the hopes that the brain's going to receive happiness or pleasure from the craving. This desire for immediate satisfaction blocks our prefrontal cortex from considering the long-term goals against the craving. This is so fascinating to me because we've studied willpower at the Healthy Way for years. Willpower, the ability to say, I will, I won't, and I want. Guess where that lives? In the prefrontal cortex. Think about the angel and the devil who sit on your shoulder. You know that image we've all seen. The angel is our prefrontal cortex, the one who considers the long-term consequences, while the devil's the one craving the short-term rewards. I want it now. If we don't get our craving, our bodies releases stress hormones to make us feel discomfort or even pain in some cases. This stress is meant to trick our bodies into believing that the only way to feel better is to surrender to that craving. Our brain can learn to connect the promise of a reward to anything. It's good news. If our brain thinks that something will make us happy or better, our brain will begin craving it. At the Healthy Way, we think about things like chocolate and high-fat foods and alcohol, fill in the blanks. But let me mention a few other dopamine hit activities. Checking, touching, looking at your smartphones. Social media likes or hits or follows. Codependent relationships. Drugs, smoking, gambling, pornography, alcohol. Every one of these things gives the brain a hit of dopamine. And just like the rats in the corner, it can be destroying our lives, and we still go back for another hit and another hit and another hit. Do you see why I keep talking about our great need to reward ourselves for new behavior? We must rewire our neurotransmitters so that we get dopamine hits doing something that is good for us. healthy for us. When I presented the nutritional plan at the beginning of this program, I took away your dopamine hits with all those foods that you're not going to have anymore. And I took away your pleasure pathways. Do you see what people on diets do and why people that are on a diet transfer their addiction to shopping? Do you see why the recovering drug addict gains 80 pounds? Do you see why the recovering alcoholic becomes addicted to sugar? The articles I've read over the years about the folks who've had surgery to lose weight, not changing anything about how they think, just changing the ability they have to overeat, find a way to get those dopamine hits, either with food or something else. They go to the corner and they get a hit, even when it's hurting them. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Rewards aren't a fun thing you should do to feel good and you deserve. Rewards are necessary to rewire and create new pathways in your brain. The elastic qualities of our brain that make it easy to slip into addiction also make it easy to slip out and possible to get out. Just as the habit of addiction teaches your brain to seek out substance of choice, you can also teach it to seek out rewards that give you healthy pleasures like meditation and friendship and exercise and self-love in order to heal from the damage that abuses of any kind have caused. That is the power of neuroplasticity. Neural pathways function as roads between points of interest in the brain. Each time you think, feel, or act, you are forging a new mental path. Each time you repeat a thought, a feeling, or an action, we strengthen the neural pathway. The more habitual it's used, the stronger the pathway becomes. While the less frequent pathway is used, the more it gets weak. Everyday experiences, thoughts, emotions, behaviors shape the way your brain works, constantly strengthening those neural connections you use, weakening the ones you don't. As you establish cognitive and behavioral patterns, you wear in particular pathways, using them over and over and over again like they become second nature. Imagine if you had been talking to yourself in the mirror and speaking positive affirmations habitually since this program started. Imagine if you'd been meditating every day habitually since this program started. Walking every day, journaling, prepping food every week, habitually, drinking water. What kind of neurological pathways would you have made by now? Your brain is pre-wired to seek out activities that associate with survival. When we complete such an activity, the reward pathway is activated, flooding the brain with dopamine, which motivates us to want to repeat the action over and over again to get another dose of that feel-good feeling. When we practice the list I just suggested and we find that it brings pleasure, we will need it. It will be automatic that we'll keep doing it again and again. While the adaptability of the brain is one of the reasons we're vulnerable to addiction, it's also one of our greatest assets when it comes to recovery from it. Through the deliberate practice, you can and must disrupt the damaging neural connections that drive your unhealthy eating and rewire your brain using healthier thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Over time, your brain naturally reorganizes itself around your recovery and your new habits. Rewiring requires setting new goals, practicing the healthy pursuit of rewarding yourself for following new behaviors, and seeing that the brain is creating new pathways. We must associate pleasure with these new behaviors, eating healthy, setting limits on our calories. That's the reward system for change. It's one of the most important things you can do for your brain and for permanent weight loss. I don't encourage you to reward yourself because you deserve a reward for eating the way you're supposed to eat. I encourage you to reward yourself because you have used food as a reward, a pleasure source, and a drug of choice for a long time. And if you don't replace that perceived reward, that perceived pleasure for another, you won't be able to keep yourself from it. If you don't give your brain a new way to get a dopamine hit, I promise it'll keep going back to whatever it has to do, even if it's going back into that corner, getting shocked and destroying your life. What are your pleasures? Now that I've taken your pleasure food and drink away, do you have any? Do you know what they are? Rewarding yourself regularly is a must. Your brain must link this new way of life with rewards. It's a must. Your brain is one amazing muscle. It has the ability to change. It has the ability to let go of the painful past and create a beautiful present. It really, really does. Make sure you associate tons of pleasure with where you're moving to and know the benefits of moving there. I'm trying to help you see that the habitual practice of good and beautiful living that will begin to give you the dopamine hits that your brain craves. How many times, although you are in pain physically and emotionally regarding your weight, have you gone back to that corner? You can stop, but you have to choose one habitual, rewarding choice at a time, one rewarding behavior at a time, one loving comment at a time. On my next video, I'm going to give you some very, very practical ways and practical thoughts about how to do that, how to reward yourself and make that be a natural part of your life. Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.